Price controls are unfortunately coming, as it looks like it is more a matter of when, not a matter of if. Now, obviously, we've seen many examples over the last couple of years of soft price controls, especially things like the bond market, whether you look at government bonds, corporate bonds, even high yield bonds. They've had some soft price controls as you've had the Federal Reserve been able to print money to buy these things, which keeps the interest rates on this debt low. That is a form of price control, as they're trying to keep the cost of borrowing for borrowers lower than it would be otherwise in a completely free market where you did not have that intervention. That means somebody else coming into that space wanting to be a lender and wanting to lend at a higher price won't be able to get any business, because anybody can go to a different lender and get a lower interest rate, and that price has been artificially suppressed, kept lower than it would be absent that intervention. And in the fallout of the next crash that will likely happen as a result of interest rates now going up as that buyer steps out of the bond market, what we are likely to see is the way that they deal with the crash will cause so much inflation it will start to send prices into the stratosphere, making the current 5, 6, 7% look like child's play. In an environment like this, there is only one thing that can stop inflation in its tracks other than the painful option of shutting off the money printer, and that is price controls. Unfortunately, this is a solution where the cure is worse than the disease. Ready? Let's dive in. In a completely free market, the only two factors influencing the price of any given item is going to be supply and demand. But in an environment like we've had over the last couple of years, you have the money supply expanded rapidly, then that purchasing power is handed out to individuals. That causes a spike in demand across the board, and that surge in demand will drive up the prices because there's nothing on the other side causing a corresponding increase in supply. Now, the real solution is shut off the money printer and never turn it back on. That way you attack the source of the issue and you don't attack the symptoms. But we know that people in charge love trying to deal with the symptoms instead. And so when inflation takes off after the next crash, likely what they will do is attack the prices instead of the source, which is the money printer. And the way to attack the prices, and the only way to do it really effectively, is price controls. That means by law, fixing the price of any given item so that no seller is able to sell it beyond a specific price. Usually the rationale is greedy corporate interests, evil capitalists for price gouging and exploitation. Really, it is a spike in demand caused by the money printer. And so when all their solutions fail, they'll come out with price controls, and it will cause massive widespread shortages. And I'm going to use an example here so that everybody can understand that even in disaster scenarios, usually the one scenario where people say, hey, I'm opposed to price controls except for in disasters. Just to push this argument to the extreme, I'm going to use a disaster scenario to show why price controls are the last thing that you want to see, even in a disaster scenario. And I'm going to use the example of water. Let's say a natural disaster, in this case, let's say an earthquake hits California, and there's widespread damage and people are in need of assistance. Let's say that because of this, the grid goes down, the utilities like water treatment plants go down. Suddenly, people are in need of bottled water. In a normal environment, a bottle of water might cost you $1. But in this case, they just had an earthquake. Nobody can get their hands on water normal ways. So clean bottled water goes through the roof in terms of pricing. Let's say it's selling for $20 per bottle. In scenario number one, let's allow price fixing, where we control the price of water bottles and arbitrarily policymakers look at $20 a bottle and say that's exploitation. Maybe $19 a bottle is where they draw the line. Again, it's arbitrary. Maybe it's $10, maybe it's $5, but why is the line at $5 instead of $6 or $10 instead of $11? Whatever price is chosen by policymakers is by definition arbitrary, because it is a person or a committee choosing a price rather than allowing free market participants to arrive at an equilibrium based on the supply and the demand of the given item. So let's say they arrive at $10 as the maximum price that you can charge for a bottle of water. Now, there there are a couple things that happen as a result of this. Number one, everybody needs water, right? And so people are going to go in an emergency where that is pretty much probably going to be the number one need. Above shelter, above food, above clothing, water is probably going to be the number one need. In that case, you don't know how hard it will be to get your hands on water because you know this item is scarce. When you arrive at a place or a vendor or a merchant who is selling water and they're by law restricted from raising their prices to any point, and let's say in this case it's $10, then what you are going to do is buy more of that water than you would if the price was higher. It's just human nature. It is the rational thing to do when you arrive at a place and they have water. $10, you're probably going to buy, let's say, just about double of the water that you would if it was $20. Now, obviously, regardless of the price, you're probably going to buy exactly what you need. But if you've got some extra funds to make some extra purchasing here, and you know water is scarce, at $10, you might hoard a little bit more of it than you would if the price was $20 or $30. If the price is higher, you might just stop buying at the exact amount that would supply your own needs, and you'd probably hoard a little bit less because the price is higher. It's going to cost you more money. But in the case of the price being controlled and the price being artificially lower than it would be otherwise, there will be necessarily a little bit more hoarding, a little bit more purchasing. And so when you control the price, it does two things. It increases the demand because that good, that commodity that is cheaper than it would be otherwise. So it increases demand, especially in a disaster scenario. The other thing it does is limits supply. And I'll show you how right now. Let's say those water bottles are $10 per bottle in California after the earthquake. We have to remember California is not the only state in the country. There are plenty of other states that did not experience a natural disaster. What do these areas have a lot of? Bottles of water. Now, let's say you are a young startup, you're an entrepreneur, you've got a little side hustle, and you sell water bottles. If you decide, you look at your garage, you've got a whole garage full of water bottles, you look at this and you calculate it up. You say, okay, I've got a truck, it'll cost me this much in gas to get all of this water over to California. Can I turn a profit? It just might be that your break-even cost is $11 per bottle. If you take all that water to California, you lose $1 per bottle. Are you going to then devote your resources as a loss to take all of these resources to California where people actually need them? Most likely not, unless you're a charity, unless you're doing this out of humanitarian, just the goodness out of your own heart. You want to donate, maybe, but the incentive in the system is not built in to attract water from where it is to where it needs to be if that price is locked at $10. Maybe your break-even cost is $15. Maybe it's $20. Whatever it is, the free market pricing of a good during a disaster will cause the price to rise to the point at which supply can meet demand. Let's say those prices of those water bottles go up to $30 per bottle and your break-even cost to get water to California is only $15. Suddenly, that's a massive profit margin for you. Way better than losing $1 per bottle. So what are you going to do? You're going to take all of that water. You're going to load it up. You're going to drive it over to where it is needed the most. And you are going to deliver that water to the people who need it most. And the way you know they need it is because they're willing to pay for it. So by allowing the price of water bottles to rise to the point that incentivizes supply to come in, you allow high prices to fix high prices. You allow that to be the cure for itself. The supply and demand will come to an equilibrium and attract the resources from where they are to where they need to be. Ultimately, what will then happen is you will attract so much new supply at those exorbitant prices that the new supply will then eventually overwhelm the demand and bring down the prices because there will now be more supply than there is demand for it, and the suppliers, the people bringing it in, will then stop bringing it in because the profit motivation will be gone. Now, a lot of people might scoff at this and think, why does there always have to be a profit motivation? Why can't the world just operate out of the goodness of its heart? And my answer is, why not rely on a system where the incentives are strong enough, regardless of if the incentives are profit or goodness, the value that's being delivered is what people need. If you want to profit in a free market, the only thing that you have to do is create something that somebody else finds valuable. You have to produce value for somebody else to get your own rewards. What is wrong with a system like that? What is wrong with a system that incentivizes producing something of value, creating something that somebody else wants? That means that if you want to make the most profits, you have to create the most value. You have to do a service for society that they value more than anything else. And this system, even in a disaster scenario, has such strong incentives that it is the most effective at getting resources from where they are to where they need to be, even in a disaster situation. It's not exploitation, it's allowing the system to work as designed. And the fact of the matter is, no other system designed, ever thought of, works as well as free markets. Now, the future might be different than the past, and it's possible that humanity stumbles upon a system that does work better than this, and everybody can just chase rainbows and butterflies and operate out of the goodness of their heart, and everything will be hunky-dory for everybody. But in the reality that we live in, and with the current information that we have, and with the history we can look back on and study, free markets are the best system that we have, and anytime you interfere with that, all you end up doing is causing more problems than existed in its free market state. And it's ironic, but the proposed solution here is, knowing that price controls are going to be coming, the rational thing to do is to store up on those things in advance, which again, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you know that price controls are going to be subjected on any given item, then the rational thing to do is buy those things ahead of time before the price controls hit, because you know there are going to be shortages as a result, because you know the supply will be limited and the demand will be higher than it would be otherwise. And so people are going to rationally go out and store up on those things, which will contribute to the shortages as well. So keep an eye out, because those things where the prices start to go up exorbitantly more than other things, and you start to see policymakers blame greedy, evil capitalists and exploitation of people who can't afford basic necessities, watch out, because those are the things that are going to be the first targets for price controls. As always, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.